how to understand the role better and help the team to understand that you are a good candidate, right? So how to really explore that together with the team, because the reality is sometimes the team will not know what kind of candidate they need. Sometimes the needs will change depending on how long the process is taking. Sometimes the team is just not experienced, right, in hiring a designer. Like things happen, right? Like it's the business. Like we all work in startups. We understand those kind of things, right? They used to work.
In my experience, I had cases when designers or like people who I worked with got 4 or 5 offers. And I think a big role here played, like the negotiations played a big role. So there are some tactics there, as there are some secrets, there are some tips, definitely. But maybe we could share some of them to people who can compete, get good offer and good terms like they deserve.
I know who I am. I know what my strengths are. I know what the areas for growth are. I know what I bring to the table, and this is the price for it, right? Like, isn't it much more empowering rather than going and saying, I don't care, or like, I don't know, like, you tell me.
Welcome to Growthmates. This is Kate Syuma, growth advisor, previously head of growth design at Miro. Here you can learn how companies like Dropbox, Adobe, Canva, Loom, and many more are building excellent products and growth culture. Get all episodes and a free playbook for growth teams on our brand new website, growthmates.club. Have you ever wondered why some people start using the product but never come back after the first session? The problem is that they can't easily uncover the value that your entire team has been working hard on. We created a course intended to help you design the most valuable onboarding experience. The course is filled with best practices we gathered from over 80 companies and frameworks that will help you uncover improvements in your onboarding, run user research, and create a fresh roadmap of new experiments. The new cohort starts already on the 2nd of September, and for dear listeners, we provide a discount of 100 euros with the promo code Growthmates. I would like to interact with each participant directly, and this is why we are collecting a small group of only 25 participants. You can find the link in the episode description. I would appreciate if you could also share it with someone who can find this valuable. This episode is brought to you by AppQs, the platform that helps you design, deploy, and test captivating onboarding experiences in minutes, not weeks. AppQs created the Product Adoption Academy, which includes courses, templates, and examples to help you level up your product adoption, and you can use it entirely for free. Check out the 5-step growth flow review template, which I created to help companies connect growth hypotheses with behavioral patterns to uncover meaningful improvements. Find an example of Dropbox onboarding inside and use this template to review any growth flows in your product. Get the template through the link appqs.com/growthmates.
Hello, Lena. Welcome to Growthmates. I'm so happy to see you finally here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so good. Thank you, Kate. I'm so excited to be here. I'm such a big fan. I've listened to every episode, so I cannot believe I'm here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh my God. This is a pleasure to hear. And it's not so often when I talk to people who I really worked with for, I don't know how many years, 2 or 3 years we worked together at Miro. And just for everybody to know, Lena is that person who helped me hire, I think, over 10 product designers, like content designers, user researchers, so many people. Yeah, thank you for such an amazing journey that we had with you together at Miro.
Yeah, absolutely, Kate. Thank you as well. And it's still kind of in my heart. It's such an incredible experience. And there are so many fruits now that I also have, that sharing with others that I learned throughout this time. So thank you so much as well for teaching me so amazing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But today, what we would like to focus on, we would like to make this as valuable as possible for anyone who is looking for a career shift, for a job shift, because you're an expert in this field. But before we jump into this fruity stuff, I always like to start with just unpacking a little bit of your personal growth journey. And you've been in design recruitment for quite a while, from N26, then during your time at Miro, and recently you shifted to a very interesting discipline, to user research. Probably everybody already asked you that question, but what led you to make that leap?
Yes. Lots of people ask me, The funniest part that, people were really congratulating me when I made that shift. And I was like, wow, recruiting is not such a bad job either, But it was very interesting that people were so excited about seeing those shifts and seeing that it's completely possible, because I feel like the market is in such a bad state that everyone is really cheering up for each other. But to be completely honest, Kate, I don't have an excellent pitch for you how I'm from recruitment to user research and why it happened and what's ahead of me. And I think that's a big learning that I've had in the last couple of years, that things change and they shift, and your perspectives shift, and your goals shifting as well. What I can definitely tell you is that when I got into design recruitment, it was by complete chance, because just basically at N26 they were giving out different departments, and I definitely knew what I definitely don't want to do. I definitely didn't want to do like backend engineering, right? Or I definitely didn't want to see it like in a very technical data department. So when design popped up, I was like, oh my God, I love art. I started to be an architect, but then I kind of, I decided not to go for it. So I raised my hat, and that was it. And then when I started going deeper and deeper into the discipline, I just loved it so much. I could not believe how amazing was that. Like, the people were amazing. The discipline was amazing. The problem space was so cool. And I just started learning about it so much that, at some point, an amazing person, very, very visual person kind of in my life, Dalia, came back and she said, do you want to be a part of my team? And I was like, no, my career as a recruiter is like blooming, and I'm going to be a big shot. But then as the time was going, I was like, wow, this is so amazing. I can really touch something with my own hands, what I've been building teams for. And that was a very big decision for me, because I thought, if I do want to build myself, even as a mentor for the future, and as a person who's going to be helping to build those careers from like the very beginning to the very executive levels, as a profession, I have to start doing things that I'm training people to get a job for. And that shifted my perspective as a mentor as well in a very different and interesting ways.
Wow, this is super interesting career shift. We have seen so many career shifts on this podcast. You remember Tom has been there here as well, and he shifted from design to recruitment. There were people who shifted from design to product management to engineering to marketing to all of these disciplines, but we have never had such a candidate, such a person like you, which is also an interesting career trajectory, right? But still, you're quite dedicated to the recruitment field, right? So you're sharing a lot of useful content with everybody who is looking for a new job, and you are now also starting your first course on that career topic. So why you're doing that? So after so many years in that field, why you're still quite loyal to career and recruitment disciplines?
Absolutely. I don't think that I left recruitment because I just, couldn't do it anymore. I was like so filled with that. But I wanted something else. I had to do something else. I wanted to be challenged, and I wanted to learn new things, and I wanted to see other things, right? Because I felt that I reached such a top of like excellence of operational recruitment, and there was no opportunities to go for anything else. And I wanted to learn something else. But then at the same time, so like I love it, basically. I love recruitment. I love building teams. Such an impactful role. I cannot believe that some people don't think so. It's a tough job, and I can definitely tell you that. But I also think that, seeing those teams starting to produce something and collaborating and becoming friends, you literally bring people together. It's insane. I absolutely love that. I think that's so just fulfilling to see that. But I also, on the moral way perspective, I cannot stop being a recruiter and being a mentor and being kind of, this advisor, because the market has not improved and the situation has not improved. And I just feel if I kind of, remove that part of identity from myself, I will lose a big part of myself, right? Because I love helping others and I love seeing that impact. And I love seeing others creating the career opportunities that they may have not had, without the good advice and good timing and things like that. So I don't see myself stepping out of it and, stop doing that.
Oh, yeah, that really resonates. You reminded me that when I moved also from Miro and started my independent track, there was a thing that I wasn't sure if I want to keep it or, deprioritize this. It was one-on-one coaching and mentoring. I was like, yeah, the L&D budgets are not there. It's quite tough for people to afford that. And for me, like, I need to prioritize some things. But now looking back, like after 6-7 months, I've seen so many cases when I said yes to these opportunities and were open for these people, and it led to dramatic shifts in their career. We can talk about some of the examples today. Yes. I'm sure you have plenty of them as well from your practice. So shifting to this juicy part of our conversation, you're keeping an eye on markets, like constantly. You see what is happening. You have this like understanding of the state of design and user research, like, and product jobs market. So it would be great today to discuss some of the challenges that you've noticed and maybe give some advice to both companies maybe and individuals how to address these challenges that they can probably, after listening to that, just implement, just update their CV, update something in their portfolio, and just take out of this episode something useful that they can try. But before we talk about these top challenges, maybe for those who are not keeping an eye on that yet and just like, maybe someday I will think about changing a job, I'm quite prepared, but I don't know like how the typical interview process even looks like these days because it's constantly changing. Maybe you could help all of us refresh our understanding of like a typical interviewing process for design user research role. So what are these steps and maybe what are the new things that you've noticed that started like companies started introducing to make this process even more complex? Yeah.
You so right. The process is becoming more and more complex, which is a very negative tendency, right? Like that we see, and it should be improving and becoming more user friendly for both sides, for recruitment side, for the company, and of course for the user as the candidate. For now, there is a basic and standard process. Basic is like, it's a word that doesn't give the credit to the process because usually it consists of from 5 to 8 stages, so it's long, right? And it does take quite some time. In many companies, they keep in touch with so many recruiters, and indeed, even though there are so many people on the market, the processes expand, right? The timelines expand, which is also quite a negative tendency that we're seeing. But basically, you start usually, you apply, and then, of course, the recruiter reaches out, right? In good companies, and that's what we used to have in Miro together, you and I, we did that a lot, that I would review the portfolio and the CV, and then I would ask for your feedback, right? So we want to align and want to make sure that there is like as much alignment as possible before we even start taking the time of the candidate, because it's quite important to be very thoughtful of that. So if everything is okay, we move into the recruiter screen. After the recruitment screen, once again, a good practice, there would be a team alignment or at least recruiter to hiring manager alignment. Is that a good match? Are we seeing some, red flags or green flags that we want to double down in the hiring manager screen? And then afterwards, we go into the conversation with the hiring manager. This is an important one because this is the moment when you can also see who is leading that team and who is setting up the vision, you as a candidate, and then the hiring manager can also make basically a decision whether you or not you're a right candidate. And then afterwards, that's where things get very, very serious because you go into the take-home task or whiteboarding challenge, or, there are lots of ways to kind of, lead those sessions. But basically you go into the assessment. And so after the skill assessment round, that's basically the place where most of the candidates, unfortunately, would be filtered out. So if you passed it, that's already a very good track towards the offer. After the skill assessment, usually the companies want the candidate to meet the team, cross-functional team members, and we go into the kind of, cultural, cross-functional, behavioral interviews and kind of, questions are coming out with that level of competencies as well. And then afterwards, if it's a very long process that you and I had, you would go into the executive round, right? So if someone from the executive leadership team would come in it depends on the seniority level, right? So like also there is no one size fits all. And I think different processes need to be adjusted for different seniority levels, because simply it's quite important that, you pick up on some of the things in senior profile that you don't have to pick up on the junior profile. And then after that, of course, there will be a negotiation point. I think that's very important to understand as well, that between the executive round and the offer, there is a negotiation point, right? And this is a very powerful moment for a candidate because the company wants them. And then you go into the offer.
Oh, yeah. You reminded me my whole life, like for the last 3 years at Miro, and how many like challenges I had as a hiring manager as well, especially in this last point from like the executive round till the offer accepted, these negotiations. You remember we sometimes lost like very promising candidates, and you just sometimes cannot control everything. And for hiring managers, it's also some sort of a skill to learn how to balance this uncertainty, how to make sure like you have, let's say, several candidates in parallel that you can rely on as a strategy. So we can discuss definitely every single part of that, but we will not have time for that today. Maybe interesting piece that I still receive a lot of questions about, like the preference of home task versus the whiteboarding session. Recently, I had a session, an episode here with Jenny from Loom, head of product at Loom, and they still have home task for product managers, and they have it specifically to validate the product sense. They think it's like the most reliable way to do that. And I personally agree with that. There is a lot of value of home task. From the other side, there are a lot of downsides, like for candidate experience. Like if somebody would give me a home task today, I wouldn't take that. I would give some rationale why I'm not taking it. I would give some alternatives. What can be the other way to validate my skills? So what is your opinion on that?
To be honest, I think the choice of what kind of task you go on for should be relying heavily on what are you trying to assess, right? Are you trying to assess the visual skills of a designer? Then potentially take-home task is a better choice, right? Because they can take time and really kind of put those pixels in. If you want to see their collaborative skills, there is no way you can see it on the take-home task, right? And so I think that's very important to kind of, balance it out. I think what's also very important, that's what not so many companies are thinking about, is how inclusive is it, right? Because if you give the take-home task, definitely people who don't thrive being like on the spot, alone against several interviewers, they will definitely appreciate that calm and quiet time and to kind of put their thoughts together. But then there you cannot control how much time they invest, right? And quite often, it's not even a problem that they invest more because, the outcome is great. But it's just more the problem that, the expectation, for example, was A and they did B, but they already invested so much time, and then you kind of, reject them potentially, and that's creating this whole kind of bad collision around the task. Well, on the whiteboard challenge, I think it's quite hard for non-native speakers, right? And it's just harder simply to think in the second language or anything like that. I personally don't think either of those are good. And if I were to really kind of, design the process from scratch in the company that, can afford to really rebuild it, because it's very expensive, let's face it, right? And it's expensive not in terms of the money, but also resources and education, onboarding, training, it's kind of building a product, right? Building the recruitment process. And this is why I always compare recruitment process and the product, because there is a lot of iteration and bugs kind of that you don't expect and things like that. But I think the future of recruitment in design and user research is the assessment centers, right? So you really embed a person depending on where they are, potentially in the virtual kind of environment of the meeting. They maybe shadow some of the parts and then they contribute to some of the parts with having a lot of content and context as well that they can reuse and kind of rebuild on top. So imagine that the person is for the first day on the job, right? Like what can they do? And I think that's much friendlier than actually putting them in an hour and saying, we know it's not enough time, but show us what you've got, right? And off you go. But I don't have a strong preference because I simply think that it's really up to the personality, the needs of the company, the kind of the task, right? Is the take-home task is completely about the product of the company, that could be a problem, right? But if it's completely unrelated, that's what we used to do. I think there is not much problem to actually give that task to a person on the whiteboard session or as a take-home task and then see what they bring.
Interesting. Just to summarize, definitely like there are pros and cons between test home task, whiteboarding session, and the last thing that you've shared, this sort of shadowing presence of the candidate who can maybe experience how it is in a more realistic environment, and the other side of the team can also experience that vibe and like how it feels like. I really like this idea, but definitely it's like quite expensive to introduce. But if it would be an option, I would go for this option. And probably companies who are even earlier in their like hiring stages and they are building a founding team, it's very important to see how you are getting along. Talking about this assessment criteria, let's say it's super formal name for that, but I've recently created this as a part of the holistic growth playbook. I created this summary of hiring criteria for product roles, and there are sections of like general criteria for product roles, growth criteria, collaboration and teamwork, etc. And looking at that, I think there were like around 20 assessment criteria there, and it's quite a lot of things that I was assessing when I was a hiring manager. And like there are a bunch of things there, from like product discovery, user research, to leadership skills. Also for individual contributors, it's important to assess leadership skills, like how they deliver the high quality experience and what does it mean, the high quality for them, etc. So we can maybe link it to the show notes. But I was curious to hear from you. Have you noticed any new requirements that companies are like prioritizing right now? So for them, it becomes like a must-have that previously it wasn't like that.
Absolutely. I'm seeing a few shifts for sure. And interestingly enough, that some of them on the hard skills, kind of like, the design skills, and some of them also on the soft skills, which is quite expected. On the hard skill side, I think what's becoming extremely in demand and popular is, designers who understand and have worked with, or like have touched to some extent, accessibility design, right? Because now it's not just the game of a good design, but like, can you serve everyone in the world, right? Like, gladly, more and more companies start thinking about it. We're on such a beginning, truly, right, of this journey, but it's becoming very important and very popular. So I can see a lot of those requirements didn't pop up as like the major requirements, but lots of companies also hire accessibility designers, and I think that's a very interesting skill to look into right now, because I personally think it's extremely fascinating topic overall. I think what's important as well is now design systems is quite on the rise. I don't know what's going to happen with design systems as the AI kicks in, right? So like, I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't know how it's going to be working together. I believe the designers will be replaced with the AI? Absolutely not, right? Like, I don't think anyone will be. I think designers will be enhanced with AI. But to what extent that kind of work is going to be enhanced and like how, it's a very interesting question, right? So that's kind of, on the skills that I see that are extremely important. And I think everyone will agree with me that, there was like a graphic design 10 years ago, and then UX popped up, and I was like, oh my God, UX is the most important and the most, the coolest thing on earth. And now everyone is like, okay, but like UI is also important, right? So like everyone is coming back into this like visual design section. I think it's pretty amazing how versatile, for example, designer is, right? As a professional, how many things they can do. And I think it's also pretty amazing how many tools enable you to be extremely skilled in visual aspect, right? Without, like, it's not old school anymore. But this is something that I always recommend to have a look at and kind of, try to be up to date with those kind of things, because not only we want good products, but we want them to look delightful, right? Like it's just nice when they're delightful. And simply, that's what creates that amazing user experience. On the soft skills and soft side, I think truly the major skill that's coming up is the storytelling. We used to call it communication skills, and it kind of implied that you can talk to me and I can understand you, and off we go and going and solving problems. But I think the more this tech kind of world and product development and product design, all these disciplines are developing, the more we all looking into the narrative, right? Like we all listening to the podcasts and talks, we're reading books. We want the narrative. We don't want just to read it, right? Like we want to be interested. We want to be incited. We want to be engaged with that narrative. And I think what really differentiates a good designer from an amazing designer is how you build a narrative. In your answers, in your portfolios, and in your CVs. So that's something that I see that's like really on the rise.
Wow, so many useful things. And I totally agree with the storytelling aspect here. It even played a big role in my experience, in my coaching capacity experience with some of the folks I've supported. Just not to forget about that, I recently encountered, like yesterday, an article how the Figma AI situation will impact the way how you present yourself on interviews and how you design your CV. And there were some, we will attach this article to the show notes. And there were some elements that the person who wrote this article suggested to emphasize on. And these elements were like the impact of your work, complexity of your work, and real life examples of what you have done in this storytelling manner. I think all of them were quite prioritized when we were interviewing candidates with you at Miro. But what I'd like to remind again is this impact, business impact. Because so many times when I look at portfolios, I see beautiful pictures, beautiful pixels, beautiful this and that, but I don't see how this amazing solution, if it is amazing, had an impact on business. So this is how we redesigned some portfolios with my clients on one-on-one coaching sessions, and we've seen that, wow, it resonated so much, especially on this interviewing rounds with cross-functional teams. When there was a product manager, for example, they've seen this person understands how activation works. Oh my God, I really want to work with this designer. And as for the storytelling, another tactic that we've tried with some folks was to do the reverse engineering storytelling. So first you show the outcome of your work, and then you show how you got there step by step. So not telling a boring story like 50 slides about this and that, and then sometime in 30 minutes you will show the outcome of the work, but doing it vice versa, like showing the outcome and then getting back to that step by step. It was also quite an impactful tactic. And now I'm happy to discuss it with you. So talking about the challenges that you've noticed currently for people who are looking for a new job, maybe we can start with something that is happening at the very beginning of the process, right? So at the job application process, people are getting ghosted, right? So this is the problem that we have. They are not getting enough interview invites. So is there anything they can do to stand out in this crowd and get these long-awaited invitations?
No, absolutely. And there is. And, it hasn't been so long that I've been a recruiter. And it was very interesting to observe how some folks just follow this very old school narrative of I apply and I wait. And some folks get very creative, yet there is nothing impossible really. And it really works, right? And I'm using all these learnings in my talk on Thursday and in my course as well, because I think it was just so impactful. And I saw these being impactful across different recruitment teams. But the overall strategy, I think good application assets is the step number one, right? And I love that you're talking about the impact, because how many CVs I saw where it says, I collaborated with the cross-functional team. I facilitated the workshops, right? I created the wireframes. And I'm yes, that's the job description. That's your job. But did you do it well or it wasn't good, right? what was the impact of it, right? And lots of people very set on the idea that impact is just like the percentages and the money, and things like that. Unfortunately, since actually don't have this information, right? Like it is what it is for different segments, especially like UXR, for example. It's quite hard to talk about the impact of your project if it hasn't been adopted and launched, right? But I think impact can be versatile as a word, right? It can be your collaboration with the team, right? It can be the speed of your work. It can be the amount of projects that you've worked. It can be even one user feedback or anything like that, right? Like, talk, but just showing that you understand that the feedback is there is already a very good sign for an employer. And similar to the portfolio, I love your example with the reviewers kind of, presentation. There's an amazing TED talk by one of the best sellers from the US. And she also said, like, the Hollywood movies usually show you the very end and then they start leading you kind of, how it got there. So I thought it was quite a genius thing, and I've seen quite a few portfolios like that. It's pretty powerful for sure. So yes, having good assets is a very good thing, but I think what really sets you apart is also how you network with people, right? Because let's face it, it's a very overcrowded market, right? So like I've been doing some research for my talk that I'm going to be having in a couple of days. And so since 2022, there has been like 500,000 people laid off. Plus, let's think about how many people have graduated, right? How many folks like myself moved from one field to a design field, right? And now want to get a job. So the market is just so inflated, and it is what it is. There are not as many recruiters as well as it used to be to actually process all of those CVs. So what I found extremely powerful is that when the candidates actually go ahead and start connecting, right? Start engaging with the content of relevant influencers, right? Linked influencers or anything like that, however you want to call that. When they start engaging with the teams. Like I honestly, at Miro, I had so many times when someone from my design team would come and say, hey, Lena, this person reached out, they shared their portfolio. I really liked it. Shall we interview them? And I'm like, amazing. Part of my job is already done, right? Like my team is approving. We saw it, like amazing. Let's go for it. And I thought that was pretty amazing way to actually kind of stand out and say, hey, like I understand the dynamics of the market. Like here I am. I'm very passionate. I'm very interested in having this opportunity and just getting that call. And the third thing, and I'm quite surprised that people forget about the fact that maybe you're unemployed even right now, but you used to work with people, right? Unless you just graduate. And yes, but that's also a little bit of a different environment, right? But if you have worked somewhere else, you know people from different departments. It doesn't have to be design or product department. But why don't you reach out to those folks and ask how they're doing and say, hey, by the way, I'm also looking for a job, right? Is there any opportunity that you could refer me to or any person you could refer me to? And I've seen it working so well. Like my mentors and I got quite a few interviews actually going through like the old network simply. And this is how we used to recruit, right? If you would come in as a new hiring manager or a new designer into Miro, I would sit you down and say, okay, open your LinkedIn and let's see who you wish to work with, right? And this is how we hire people. So why don't we use it in the reverse way?
Absolutely. I love this idea of networking. I think I noticed how many people have been reaching out to me from both sides, from companies, from individual contributors, and asking, Kate, do you know somebody who is a fit for this role? Or, hey, Kate, I'm looking for a new opportunity. Could you connect me with this person? And I think it's great that these people are reaching out and trying to help them on some terms and capacity, especially to companies who are reaching out to me and asking for these references. I think now there should be some sort of model defined how I can help them with that. And feel free to do that. Feel free to keep reaching out to me and I can share how I can help. But definitely, I think this is a very reliable strategy. And especially for companies who are looking for bar raiser candidates. Sometimes if you are just reaching out to them, if recruiter is reaching out to them saying, hey, would you like to consider this job? It doesn't work. You remember the strategies we used? I personally reached out to these people, even not mentioning that we are hiring, just introducing myself, asking for having a coffee chat with me. By the way, some of these folks converted into Growthmates guests
I love
So
it.
I had a bunch of them. Yeah, so because I built the first initial connection, I wasn't so like sort of pushy with this idea to hire them, but more like opening the connection first and then figuring it out how we can collaborate and help each other. So this is the tactic I think that is very powerful these days, especially in this crowded market, as you've mentioned. And for everybody who is looking for a job, yes, please network. It's super important. And for people who are looking for bar raising candidates, I also suggested it a couple of times. Just look through the guests on Growthmates, and this might be your bar raising candidate. So luckily, if the person got further and they're invited into the further phases like portfolio review, I think this is the most challenging, even still, it's quite challenging these days. Let's stop on this point and discuss it. So maybe any things, any tactics that you've seen that worked well, maybe from your experience of attracting people from different companies. So what made their portfolio exceptional? So what are the elements that you still remember that were like memorable?
Yeah, absolutely. To me, and that's a personal taste, right? So like I also think that there are some like baselines for every portfolio to be amazing, but there are some things that really stand out. And to me, that's definitely a personal touch. I love when I open a portfolio and I'm like, wow, I get who you are. Like I get what kind of designer you are. Like, you know, when people talk a lot about like visual and then it's like so visually appealing, or when they talk about growth and it's like, you know, you just see all those elements and they really show their personality with like the colors, the elements, the fonts and things like that. And I'm quite surprised how underrated those things are, right? Like I understand like we're not talking about the brand design, but having some sort of this visual identity to you, I think, first of all, it's amazing, right? Like, why don't we all create some visual identity for ourselves, right? Because like personal brand is such a big thing right now. But also, you know, having that first impression really sets you up. Like, there is no way I will not, like, I even now thinking about several portfolios out of all these years that like come to my mind right away because I just was blown away by the visual aspect. The second part to me, and that's what I call an amazing recruiter experience, is that, you know, when you go through the case study and it's just perfect amount of information, you know, it's not too long. You really know where you are. Like you really know what it's talking about. It's not too much text, but it's so enough to understand every important detail. And I think the portfolio that's really in my mind right now is Elvis, who was on the Miro team. When I saw this case study that's been built in pitch, right, when he showed this diamond, and then he was really walking you through this double diamond. It was absolutely gorgeous. Like, I loved it. Just black and white, so simple, yet so stylish, you know, they're so sleek. Like, that what really makes a difference. And I think I love when designers add something personal, right? Or some interaction to it, right? Like, it can be anything. It can be like a funny contact form. It can be like a personal anecdote. It can be literally a clickable prototype that leads you into something interesting that the product had. But I think this interactive like gamification moment in the portfolio, you know, when you scroll through like thousands of portfolios and then you see that, you're like, that was fun, you know, like, and you know, this person will bring those ideas to the table. So I think that's pretty amazing actual thing to see. Besides, of course, once again, the baseline kind of things that should be in every portfolio.
Yeah, I love this idea of adding personal touch. It reminded me of my small video on Growthmates website that I also added just to be more personal, you know, in this digital world. And now we can be so playful with these AI capabilities like creating digital assets. So it can be really beautiful. I would like to add maybe a little bit of strategic advice on how to design your portfolio. So, and something that worked well when I gave this advice to some of the folks who asked me for help, especially for growth product design or also for roles that are quite connected to some business impact. Again, adding like a bit more structure. So this double diamond idea is good, but if you have a structure of your work, if you show that you know the design process very well from like discovery, design, solutioning, prototyping, iteration, etc., it would be great. Otherwise, it's kind of a bit free form, a bit challenging to understand how you follow the process in the real environment. If it comes to the growth roles, I would also suggest to follow the idea of hypothesis, solution, and potentially like what success looks like, just to show that you understand how to formulate the hypothesis. And so many folks cannot do that well. Definitely, like, just remind yourself how to do that and how it was connected to some business impact, just to show this framework. Iterations are amazing for any roles. Like, you show that you really worked on that, collaborated, rather than just closed in a room, designed everything, and got back with this perfect solution. So showing a couple of iterations. And with one of my mentees, we tried this, like, actually introducing all of these things, introducing this idea of reverse storytelling, showing the outcome first. But there was one thing that I gave an advice, he didn't listen to me, and he said, I kept that. So that was a messy part of his work, sort of. He kept the wireframes. I said, like, no, it's like, it's a bit weird to keep it in the portfolio. Just remove it, why we are spending time on, like, in the conversation with these people, probably you need to skip that. He didn't listen to me. He kept that, and he said, Kate, like, it was valuable to keep it because people realized that I'm real. They felt relatable to that. So a product manager could feel like, oh, I understand wireframes. I can feel related to that step. I could probably give some feedback, or we could create these wireframes together. So by wireframes, I mean like some maybe sketches or crazy 8 sessions. And being relatable in a way is also great. Elvis' portfolio example is great because there were elements of interaction with people and collaboration. So it's also very relatable how we will work together, how the session will look like. This is a very beautiful element to include in the portfolio. We can attach Elvis' portfolio to the show notes. I think he doesn't mind. And Lena, anything else that we haven't discussed yet on challenging elements? So we discussed how not to be ghosted. So we need to network, how to show your skills in the portfolio and stand out from the crowd in the portfolio. Maybe we can discuss the other piece of, like, maybe if you'd like to discuss some other interviews, we can discuss them, but also we would like to talk about negotiations and how to stand out in the negotiations phase.
Yeah, definitely. I think the only big thing that I really want to add, and that was very interesting because I surveyed 350 people like before I started building my course. And so many folks started saying like, oh, there's lack of clarity of the interview stages, the seniority of the roles, like what's expected and things like that. I loved what you've built, as the playbook. I think that's absolutely amazing. But there's also you can have that, you can read the job description, but I think what's really important, this is like a big advice that I'm giving to everyone, like remembering that recruitment is a two-way street, right? Like you're here to ask questions as much as answer them, right? And so this is something that I'm putting like as a separate model in my course to talk how to understand the role better and help the team to understand that you are a good candidate, right? So how to really explore that together with the team, because the reality is sometimes the team will not know what kind of candidate they need. Sometimes the needs will change depending on how long the process is taking. Sometimes the team is just not experienced, right, in hiring a designer. Like things happen, right? Like it's the business. Like we all work in startups. We understand those kind of things, right? They used to work. So I think it's very, very important to kind of, set yourself up for success and asking right questions and being curious, right? Because that's what designers and user researchers do. They ask questions, right? They ask why questions as the follow-up. And I think that's a big mentality in the recruitment process as well. If you don't know something, you have to go and ask for it, right? Before waiting what's going to happen. But that's something I wanted to add.
Yeah, this is a beautiful addition. You reminded me that in addition to this 20 assessment criteria for the scorecard, what I had as well is the quality of questions that candidate asked me, especially for managerial roles, leadership roles, and any senior roles. It shows the active listening. It shows how actively they listen to you and how deeply they are engaged and, sort of intentional about this opportunity. And this is like very, very important. So training yourself how to ask these questions on the interview is exceptional. Yeah. and get into this hopefully desired stage of negotiations in case some people got there. In my experience, I had cases when designers or like people who I worked with got 4 or 5 offers. And I think a big role here played, like the negotiations played a big role. So there are some tactics there, as there are some secrets, there are some tips definitely, but maybe we could share some of them to people who can compete, can, get good offer and good terms like they deserve for their experience, but maybe they just are not aware of these tips. So maybe we could share something here if you'd like to do that.
I would love to do that because I honestly think it's just such a big part of the conversation as you get in like a new role. And, so many people are hesitant to talk about the money because they believe like, oh, if I'm going to speak about the money, I'm going to come across greedy and then the company will not want to hire me, right? And I think this is such a broken mindset. And if that's what the company is thinking, maybe that's not the right company to work for, right? And it's okay as well because we do work for the money, right? Like that's also, of course, we want to grow and learn, but like we also need to get paid. And I think that there is nothing bad about it. So the tip number 1 is that the conversation about the salary should start literally at the very conversation with the company. And it's okay to drive this conversation, right? If you face an experienced recruiter, you will be asked, right? And then you can play this game like, what's your range? Okay, what's your range, right? And it's up to you. I personally, I have a very strong moral compass, right? So if I know we cannot afford the person, it's okay to maybe have another conversation and see for the future, because what we said, networking is everything, right? And we did have situations that we couldn't hire a person right away and then we hired them in a year, right? Those things happen. But I think really driving this conversation for yourself and knowing your worth instead of just waiting to be completely consulted by the company how much they want to pay you is an extremely important step in your preparation for the interview, in your confidence building as well. I know what the market is. I know who I am. I know what my strengths are. I know what the areas for growth are. I know what I bring to the table, and this is the price for it, right? Isn't it much more empowering rather than going and saying, I don't care, or I don't know, you tell me. So start from the very beginning and have a very open conversation. I think it's completely fine to have a number and say, this is my number and I'm open to hear, and have in mind the lower number that still will satisfy you, right? Because you don't want to give the ultimatum kind of to the company, because quite often it also may not be met. And just, remembering that recruiter is your friend in that part is very important. I'll try to make them your friend because they will try to befriend you as well. But really having the open conversation, explaining why a certain lifestyle is necessary, why a certain salary is necessary, why a certain cost of living is as it is, right? So having those arguments is quite important. And then last but not the least, and this is what I saw the candidates doing so well, and I love it. As a recruiter, I honestly, sometimes I would sit on those negotiation calls, be like, wow, you do deserve them. I know. I think that's a great just preparation of that negotiation, right? I always suggest the folks to kind of, ask for feedback as much as they can throughout the process, not only to negotiate on that, but to know how you're doing throughout the process. But then afterwards, you can also set yourself up for success. Well, you said that I'm doing well at this, and this is the priority, right? And this is the outcome that you're expecting from me. And this is what I have done before. And this is the price for it, right? And you do have a powerful position if you got an offer. I don't think you should be blinded by it or get arrogant, because that's counterproductive. And you don't want to start a new role with a scandal kind of on the salary. But having that kind of outline, this is what you expected, this is what I showed, this is what I bring, this is what I deserve. Once again, building the narrative, right? I'm very excited to come and contribute, but this is how much it's going to cost. And I think that's totally okay when the candidates build that pitch, and when they pitch, they usually win. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, you reminded me about even my personal growth track on training myself to be a salesperson in this new advising and consulting adventure. And honestly, I think that skill in your life will be absolutely useful. Maybe today you're a designer and you need to sell yourself maybe once in 5 years to a recruiter. Maybe at some point you would like to sell goods. Maybe at like some point you would like to be a solopreneur. Who knows? So this storytelling and like authentic way of selling yourself in a way is very, very useful. It's a life skill. And now I'm trying to teach myself how to do that. But also I'm super open about that. I even published my pricing on the website. So, it's so crazy that we are hiding this information. We are not sharing our salaries. Nobody knows how much things cost. We are not sure about sharing it on the interviewing rounds, and we are so shy about that. But in reality, this is if, for example, you're building a business, or if you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur or advisor, this information is super important. Also to filter companies who are working with or not. Also for other companies to manage expectations about working with you or not. It's something for us to learn early on, definitely. So anyways, just to wrap it up, we discussed different elements of this challenging process, from the starting, applying, and how negotiations are important there, the portfolio presentation and how it is important. By the way, if somebody who is not a designer is listening to this episode, I've heard several times from people who are hiring for growth or leadership for product roles that they also want to look at portfolio. So funny enough that sometimes product managers who have portfolio can benefit and stand out from the crowd of other product managers who don't have any portfolio, any website, any beautifully designed narrative about their work. So just a tip for you guys. And last but not the least, we discussed the negotiations and how to use some tips and tricks to get the best offer. Lena, I know you have a course coming up soon. Would you like to share a couple of words about that?
Absolutely. I'm actually busy working on it as we speak as well, and it's coming together really well. I'm so excited. In very short, it's basically that I'm putting 6 years of design recruitment expertise into the framework that is supposed to support the job seekers to score a job, right? I'm not necessarily directly connecting anyone to the company, so it's very clearly outlined, but I'm speaking about all the things that we spoke today about, right? How to build your CV, how to build your portfolio, how to network, right? And not only how to network, but like really coming up with like the right templates for it, with the cadence for it. So I'm using all the recruitment expertise and just reversing it back into the job search, because I do believe there are lots of things that can be put together. I'm putting a lot of effort as well in building the whole chapter kind of on building confidence, because that's unfortunately that I'm seeing in so many candidates, that they've been really influenced by this market dynamic. And that would brings them into those situations of weak position of negotiating, right? Or not being able to advocate for themselves. And I definitely, I have a big mission in life to change those dynamics, and it will take some time. But for now, I'm starting there. So yeah, I definitely, I still have a few spots. They are being taken away quite quickly. I do hope that it's going to be many cohorts, and I'm actually putting a lot of time in thinking, how can I make that even more accessible to those who cannot afford a course at a high price, and maybe scale it up even more. So stay tuned. I have a few ideas in mind. If anyone has an amazing idea for me, I am here to listen as well. But yes, it's going to start in 2 weeks, and very, very excited to see what's the outcome of it.
Yeah, Lena, my huge respect to the fact that you're doing that. We will definitely attach the links to the show notes, and I will do my best to help you get some students on this amazing course. And by the way, I will be a guest on one of the sessions. Yes. Also a chance to meet me if you'd like. So we are getting close to this lightning round. Several questions. Don't have to think a lot about them. Just share something that comes to your mind. So the first one, as we discussed this interviewing process, what is your favorite interview question and what you are trying to unpack with it?
I think my most favorite interview question is why. So I don't have like a set interview question because, well, I've been doing it for so many years. Like, you want to spice it up. But I think what really interesting comes out of the interview is when you follow up, right? Because that's when the person does not have this prepared answer and they start really giving who they are, right? So really kind of going like, why did you do that? Or why did you choose A over B, right? Or why are you interested in this role, right? But like starting with this why, as Simon Sinek said, I find that like people really start showing who they are. And that's very, very inspiring. I love seeing authentic people.
Wonderful. Great. Start your questions with why. So the second question, not with the why, but anyways, what is your favorite design portfolio? We've talked about the Elvis portfolio. Maybe something else comes to your mind. So we would be happy to attach some links to this episode as well.
I absolutely do have a person, and she's prepping her work for my course as well, because I want to attach the real life examples. Elvis will also be on my course as a big example of the portfolio. So that's funny that we're also talking about him today. But basically, it was very interesting because I met her on my mentoring session like 1.5 years ago or something. And she came and she asked me, hey, this is what I've got, and I really want you to change my portfolio and like help me to rebuild it. And I looked at it and it was beautiful. It was just like, so everything that I described, right? Like there was an amazing structure. I could see everything that I needed right away. It was just so personal. Like I looked at her and I looked at the portfolio and I was like, this is just so holistic, as the whole brand of a person. It was amazing. Her name is Angela, and I'm looking forward to attaching this portfolio to this episode. I hope she will not mind, and to my course as well, because this is something truly, that just impressed me, because it's not about being perfect in like problem, process, UXR, iteration, but it's really kind of adding a little bit of your personal spice to it. And that's what she did really, really well.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to taking a look at that as well. Thank you for sharing that. So, as Growthmates is something like bigger than just me. It's a community. It's like people who are interested in growing themselves and their career and their products. I always ask people who are coming here who you'd like to see on this show someday. So maybe a couple of people, maybe just one person. Feel free to mention anyone.
Absolutely. So honestly, I would love to see anyone, but you specifically, Kate, because you're such a powerful and inspiring woman. And like, I love seeing what are you doing with your career. Like, you're a true designer to your career. And I think this is just so awesome. Like, I'm always so proudly talking about you and saying that I know you. But there is a woman as well in tech who has inspired me, and that's the Whitney Wolf, so the founder of Bumble. I honestly personally rooted for her when she went IPO, and I just thought it was just such a big win for all the women out there, right? Because she's a self-made billionaire, so young, with a baby, like having that company, and really like, I think the mission is so empowering of the company. And then the IPO, then it was a big success. And I think like, women like you should meet more women like her. And like, I would love to see more of those insights as well. So maybe kind of, more. And I think it's not only about, that female empowerment, but I think when strong people meet together, this is just so inspiring to see, their energies working together and their insights coming together. So I would love to see her one day on your episode.
Oh, thank you so much, Lena, for mentioning that. This is why I also invited you. I really want to make this podcast more diverse, more like inclusive, like I really do. So this is why it's on my radar to find these women and find all people of all kinds to have the diverse Growthmates group here. Thank you so much for this conversation. Really appreciated that. Good luck with the course and looking forward to seeing you on the course in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much, Kate, for having me. It's been amazing.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the show on growthmates.club and get free playbook with frameworks and insights. If you find this valuable, please share it with your friends and colleagues and subscribe to the show on your favorite platforms to get new episodes. Let's keep growing together.